Check. Okay, well, good evening. I'm Audrey Sarcy. I'm the Public Works Director for the city, and welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. Whether in the room or online, we're very excited to have this community workshop for our bike and pedestrian mobility plan. This is a very important plan for the city. This will set the framework for many policies and projects in the next few years. This plan will be incorporated into our transportation master plan, and the project list will also be incorporated into our 6-year capital improvement project list and in our longer term 20-year list as well. So very excited. Thank you for joining us. We do have a brief presentation this evening. I'm joined on the staff side by Lindsay, our transportation planner, and Andrew, our senior transportation planner, and our consultant team. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wintana Miller at DKS.
Thank you so much. All right. So the agenda today, we've got introductions, kind of already went through that, and we'll go over kind of just quickly what the goals of the project are, what kind of we're trying to get out of the project, the objectives, and then look where we are in the schedule. Go over what we heard from you guys last time. We did a community workshop back in February, so we'll talk a little bit about that, and then dive into future conditions, what we are seeing in terms of the bicycle and pedestrian network into the future, and some recommendations both on facility types and policies that we're recommending to the city right now, and then talk about next steps and open it up for Q&A at the end. So go to the next slide. Yeah. So in terms of goals, the point of this plan, it aligns with the goals of the Transportation Master Plan, which was adopted last year. This plan really focuses on providing a safe, connected, and efficient walking, rolling, and biking network in Sammamish. And what we're trying to get out of the project, the goals, Audrey kind of hit on this a little bit already, right, is to create a framework for evaluating bicycle and pedestrian projects. What do we prioritize? Where do we start? Can't do everything all at once. And then identifying some specific projects to be considered for the Transportation Capital Improvement Plan, and to look at updating some policies around complete streets, around e-bikes, crossing type, crossing frequency, things like that. All right, so schedule just kind of where we are, where we started. We kicked this project off to the end of 2024. We, like I mentioned, did a community workshop in February, presented on some of the existing conditions, shared the final existing conditions report soon thereafter. We've been working in the meantime on recommendations, so facility type recommendations, policy recommendations, prioritization criteria for, again, how do we decide where and what types of projects we're going to do, and then coming back to talk to you today. After this, we have some recommendations. We'll be developing project recommendations and putting those into a plan that will go to council early fall, looking for public hearing and adoption this fall as well. All right. So what we heard, so last, like I said, in February, in addition to the community workshop that we had, we also had an opportunity to put comments online. There's a mapping tool that we had that people could put pedestrian comments, bicycle comments, safety-related comments, things like that. We got over 280 comments from the community, so from over 100 contributors. So thanks to everybody who contributed to that and let their opinions be heard. So thank you. In terms of kind of what we heard, when it came to pedestrians, it's really about a desire to see a completed sidewalk network, expanding the amount of sidewalks. I heard a lot about speed enforcement, so some speeding concerns, safety concerns throughout the city. Definitely heard a desire for more marked crosswalks. So that is one of the policy recommendations, hits on where we prioritize crosswalks. Also, there were some requests for more flashing beacons, so kind of enhanced crosswalks as well at some specific locations. We got some comments really all over the place. East Beaver Lake Drive got some additional requests in the intersection of 37th and 205th also. When it comes to bicycle safety and bicycle requests, really, again, more bike lanes just in general, but also more protection, more separation from traveling vehicles was requested. But even beyond that, even just lane markings were also still requested. So some places where there's not any facility, lane markings are still an improvement. As well as signage, so that there are some existing bike lanes that maybe people don't know about, or how do you get to connect it to different ones? So that was something that was also requested in Northeast Inglewood Hill Drive, and Troshek Boulevard was also specifically called out by several. Okay, so in terms of future conditions, so as a reminder, the plan kind of starts off by looking specifically at what was identified as a bicycle and pedestrian priority network in the Transportation Master Plan. Really, we called out this network as a way to get to access key locations throughout the city. It's really the city's arterial network. And the reason it's called out is really just to have a way to prioritize projects. Again, we can't start off with the goal of having sidewalks everywhere, or at least being able to actually get it all done, right? So we had to be able to prioritize. So first thought was prioritizing on this network. And then we have heard from the council and from the public a desire to look at access to schools specifically off of the priority network. And so that was an analysis that was done as well. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So first we looked at sidewalk gaps. So we did, like I said, existing conditions, understanding where on the priority network, so on your arterials, where are there sidewalks either on, or where there aren't sidewalks, either on either side of the street, or even places where there's sidewalk only on one side of the street. So identifying that as gaps, right? So the solid lines are where there is sidewalk on neither side of the street, the dashed lines where it's only on one side. But we looked at the existing conditions and then also looked at projects and plans, studies that are on the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan for 2025 to 2030. So that have some funding associated with them. If they had some funding, then we said, okay, let's assume the city has already identified these as a need. So let's assume that that's done by 2044, looking out. So this is the anticipated network or gaps, really, the anticipated gaps. So we see that if you look back to the existing conditions, we fill some gaps. So Sahali Way is a project that is currently underway in design that's addressing sidewalks on one side of that street. Louis Thompson is under construction right now. There are some studies for, Beaver Lake Road and 32nd, as well as Issaquah Pine Lake Road. So those are called out as we're anticipating some improvement, but there still remains gaps on Southeast 24th Street, on some parts of 212th, Duthie Hill Road. We'll point out that East Lake Sammamish Parkway shows up as a gap because there are not we'll get to the bicycle. There's no sidewalks on East Lake Sammamish Parkway. However, we're not really considering it a gap because of the trail that's right there. But we want to think about maybe access. How do you access the trail? That's more of the gap that needs to be addressed rather than the need to put bike and sidewalks on the parkway itself. So if we look at the bikes, so similar story here. Again, the East Lake Sammamish Parkway shows up as a gap, but again, the trail is filling that need. Connections are the most important thing. We see a couple additional gaps for bicycles in Northeast 8th, 244th, Kahani Boulevard, et cetera. So we wanted to take a look at those things first as we then think about, well, where do we need to prioritize? Where is there still a need for more bicycle and pedestrian facilities? So I did this exercise the intent is to do a data-driven exercise, really like looking at what the facilities are out there and how do we decide where do we start? And so we did an exercise in GIS, a tool that looked at several different factors. So the first one was just where are there gaps? So where do we not have any facilities? Where do we have not only on one side of the street for both bicycle and pedestrian? We also looked at level of traffic stress, which we'll talk a little bit in more detail about, but it's essentially how comfortable is that facility for that roadway. We looked at multimodal level of service, so what basically was adopted or was a part of the Transportation Master Plan. Are you meeting what the desired level of traffic stress for that roadway is? Do you have a facility, but it's not quite good enough, or do you not have a facility? So looking at that in terms of level of service for those roadways. Also looked at safety. It's important too if there's a history of pedestrian or bicycle related crashes. We want to know that. Also considered the proximity to transit stops, schools, and commercial areas. About if you're within a quarter mile or a half mile of those destinations, prioritizing that. That's a really important things to connect to, key destinations in the city. And we considered slope. City is not flat, so at least taking that into consideration as well. So you can see, I don't know how well you can see, but the red lines are showing the areas of highest need, and the green is of lowest need. So they scored the lowest based on this criteria. So our next plan, as we talked about, is identifying projects. So we're kind of looking at those places of highest need and looking for solution stats, potential projects. Go to the next slide. So I mentioned school access as well. So our initial study was focused more on the arterial network. And most of the schools are actually on the arterial network or very adjacent to, but there are some that are off of that network and are focused more on local roadways. So we did another analysis looking at a half a mile buffer around the schools, focusing on the local streets and looking at potential projects there as well for, again, prioritizing their projects that may also provide access to parks and to transit and commercial areas, so connecting schools to those other destinations. All right, in terms of facility recommendations, so, we started by taking a look at the city's existing plans, standards. My thing stopped moving, but I can look at this. Anyway, the standards, policies, and codes. What does the city already say that it's doing? And then looking at peer cities. What are other folks around us doing? What is the city of Bellevue, Redmond, Issaquah? What are their kind of recommendations, guidelines related to pedestrian and bicycle facilities? Looked at state guidance. What does Washoe have to say? What is national guidance? I think that really helps the city potentially access more grant opportunities, right? If they're in alignment with what the state is recommending, then that gives you more opportunities to potentially get grant funding on projects. All right, and then we based our recommendations on the roadway characteristics. So either the roadway classification, so principal arterial, minor arterial, collector arterial. We also looked at the posted speed limit. That's a big factor in people's comfort levels on bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Also volumes, how busy is the roadway that you're walking or biking next to, and the number of travel lanes as well. So those maps you can't see too well, but the red is kind of the highest, either the highest classification, the highest speed, a lot of 35 mile per hour roadways in Sammamish. Volume as well, highest roads, obviously 228th, but several others are over 6,000 daily vehicles on the roadway. And then the last one is lanes. Most streets are one or two lanes, one lane in either direction, except for 228th. So when it comes to level of traffic stress, I talked about this briefly earlier. So level of traffic stress is basically a rating from 1 to 4, where level of traffic stress of 1 is kind of an all ages and abilities. Everybody feels comfortable. It's the lowest stress facility. It's very welcoming. And then you get range up to 4, where the 1% of people are comfortable walking or biking on that roadway. These are kind of the expert bicyclists who can ride in a 40 mile per hour street without any facility, and they're comfortable. So that's kind of the range that we're talking about, low stress to high stress, 1, 2, 3, 4. The city in the Transportation Master Plan included guidelines for what type of level of traffic stress should be the goal for principal arterials, collector arterials, and minor arterials. Generally speaking, we're looking at trying to achieve a level of traffic stress of 2, so a relatively low stress facility. Minor arterial, we're comfortable with a level of traffic stress of 3. Now these are, again, guidelines. They're not a requirement, but it's the goal that we're trying to achieve. And there may be reasons why the city is not able to achieve that on a particular roadway, whether it be right-of-way constraints, costs, et cetera. So when it comes to what we were recommending, there's a more complicated table, but I simplified this to mostly be related to the speeds. So if you're at 35 miles per hour, and that occurs on your principal arterials and your collector arterials and your minor arterials. If it's 35 miles per hour for sidewalks, we want to see a 6-foot wide sidewalk with an adjacent 6-foot buffer, generally like a landscape strip. I'll show you some pictures. If you're down at 30 miles per hour or 25 miles per hour, this actually is in alignment with the city's current codes. The guidelines, recommendations is the 6-foot sidewalk with a 5-foot buffer. Those get you to a level of traffic stress of 2, which is, like I said, the goal. So next slide, I think we've got some examples. So yeah, sidewalk, this is actually in Sammamish on 228th, sidewalk with a buffer. There's other ways of achieving buffers if you go to the next slide as well. Physical separation, this is from WashDOT's guidance too. If you have a bike lane in between or some other sort of facilities that has a vertical difference, that is considered part of a buffer too. So there's lots of different ways of achieving that separation, which provides more comfort and lower stress for pedestrians. Bicycles, a little bit different here. So again, for that 35 mile per hour, creates the highest stress, so we want the highest amount of separation. So the recommendation, the goal here is to have a separated bike lane. So have a 6-foot bike lane and a 2-foot buffer between the bike lane and the travel way. And have a vertical element of some sort. This is a WashDOT guidance for how to achieve that level of traffic stress of 2. Have these are like pylons, or in downtown Seattle, you might see like a planner. I can't think of what the term is, but a planner box basically. So there's ways of doing it, but a vertical separation of some sort, more eyes for cars to see the difference between where the bike lanes are and when the travel way is. But then once you get down to 30 miles per hour and the speeds the volumes that we have on the city streets, both on minor arterials and collector arterials, a conventional bike lane, the 5 to 7 foot wide with just a stripe, will get you to level traffic stress too, and I think achieves what the city is looking for on these roadway types at that speed. Down at 25 miles per hour, this depends on the volume. So if you have over 3,000 daily average traffic on the roadway, you do want to put a stripe down and put a bike lane in there, conventional bike lane. If you're less than 3,000 vehicles per day, I think there's no bike lane recommended. I think most people will be comfortable riding in the roadway with in mixed traffic. So here's some examples again of the conventional bike lane all the way to the separated bike lane. Those little circles are to indicate that vertical separation. In order for questions, I think we need a mic. Should we save it to the end, or is there easiest way to? Okay. All right, and then here's some examples of that too. So conventional bike lane, buffered bike lane, separated bike lane. These are in different locations in Washington. Okay, so then in terms of policy stuff too, so those are kind of the physical things out there. I mentioned crosswalks. So city gets a lot of requests for crosswalks. How do we decide where and where we should put them and where we should prioritize them? So we kind of gave this structure for where the city should be putting them in, generally speaking, or at least where you should be prioritizing them. So first, making the statement that all signalized intersections should have a marked crossing on all 4 legs. And then next up is kind of some key prioritized locations. So school route crossings, prioritizing crosswalks there, transit bus stop crossings, and in the town center area. Next up is just locations throughout the city that have a high pedestrian volume. If you have a high volume, having marked crossings to kind of channel people where they should go and they alert the drivers is the next priority here. And then also just mixed use centers, generally speaking, in Inglewood, Pine Lake, Kahani. A couple of these are just more statements about how the city sees the pedestrian network too. If we have facilities that are a part of the transportation network, it should be ADA accessible, ADA compliant. And so for roadways where we don't have facilities bike or ped facilities on the roadway itself, and we want to use an adjacent trail like the East Lake Sammamish Trail, that in order to consider that part of the network that it's addressing the need of the roadway, it should be ADA accessible. So the trail, that one works. You know, maybe the trail adjacent to Duthie Hill Road may not qualify. It's more of a trail than it is full ADA accessibility. Let's see, last we talked about spacing, so giving the city some guidance on how the distance between crosswalks desired, depending on context. So these are more general than just may apply to Sammamish, but in centers, urban mixed-use context between this, for the city, I'd basically be town center areas where you can have like the closest spacing makes sense. And then in residential or commercial corridors, maybe some of those other mixed use areas, going between 500 to 1,000 feet between crossings feels about right. Don't want to go much shorter than that or too much longer than that. And then the rest of the city is probably commercial or residential. E-bikes, e-scooters. So the main thing here, the city already has some policies related to where these units can be located in terms of where you can use your bike, where you can use your e-bike. We're just kind of adding a little bit more detail to that. Main thing is essentially on the sidewalks, bikes are allowed, must yield to pedestrians. The sidewalk is a place for pedestrians first. Bicyclists are allowed, but must yield. Same thing if you have an e-bike, class 1 or 2, which is the lower speed e-bike, basically no more than 20 mile per hour maximum kind of motor on that. And same with let's see if I can get these electric personal assistant mobility devices or something like that. Basically like a Segway or like a one wheel, I think that kind of a thing is what that means. So those things can be on the sidewalk, yielding to pedestrians. They are also allowed on the road if the speed limit is under 25 miles per hour. We're saying all of these things. So e-scooters, motorized scooters, the higher speed e-bikes, they can be on the road lower than 25 miles per hour. But if it's greater than 25 miles per hour, some of these things are not going to be allowed on the roadway. Similar with the paved trails, they are allowed on the paved trails, but at a lower speed. So just trying to make it more clear what is a safe way to be using these devices on city facilities. All right, and I think the next one is for Lindsay to talk a little bit about. Here you go.
Thanks, Wintana. Just so everyone can see me, my name's Lindsay Channing. I'm a transportation planner here at the city. So thank you all again for joining us this evening. I'm going to finish out this presentation, and we'd like to start with our staff, our public works staff, and the Sammamish Police Department have been working very closely together in the last couple of months to work on a messaging for e-bikes and how those can be addressed currently and what folks can do if they run into issues with them and how the police department can respond to that. So at a recent council meeting, I believe it was last night, the police department did give a presentation on this information. They've recently published a web page on the City of Sammamish website giving this information. So we're just giving the highlight reel here on the screen, but they are going into what's the difference between a class 1, 2, and 3 e-bike, and again, where they are currently allowed, and if you have concerns, what you should do in order to bring those concerns to light so that hopefully they can be addressed to the best of our abilities with current regulations. So the website was at the bottom of the screen there. You can also just Google it on Google or use the search feature on the city website, and it comes up pretty quickly. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about next steps. What do we do after tonight? So like Quintana was saying earlier, the next step is to get the project list compiled and then get that into the draft plan. So our goal is to have the draft plan done by mid to late August, and then we'll be able to get that out to the community and get it before council in the fall for council consideration and hopeful adoption. Once that is complete, if you can go to the next slide, What do we do with it to implement this plan, right? It's great that we have plans, but we don't want them just to live on a shelf and go, oh, look, we just completed another plan. We actually want things to come of it. So as Audrey had mentioned in the introduction, one of the first steps will be incorporating it into our transportation master plan. So we plan on doing an update of that document later this year and into 2026. So like we have done with other plans, like for instance, our transit plan, it will be referenced as an appendix to the document, and then there will be pertinent sections of it that could be extrapolated and put into various chapters of the TMP itself as it fits the context. Also, Audrey had mentioned projects that are recommendations out of this plan will be implemented into our transportation improvement plan, which is also our 6-year capital improvement plan. We have various programs and categories within that CIP that projects could fall under. So there's a list up here. The main ones would be our sidewalk gap and non-motorized program, the school zone safety program, and then our traffic safety non-motorized category and the corridor category as well. So it just depends on how large the project is and if it's tied with a larger project such as a roadway redesign or something like that. And then also policy recommendations, which Watana went over at a very high level this evening and will become more refined, will also be considered while staff is working on the right-of-way and Public Works Code standards update later this year and into 2026 as well. So we're hoping that those policies we can get implemented into clearer and more straightforward regulation in the next year or so. So with that is our presentation this evening. I do want to remind everybody this is being recorded, so if you did happen to pop in a little after we started, you'll be able to watch the recording on YouTube. Now we want to open it up for question and answer. I do ask that you please raise your hand. We will bring you a mic and then start your question and make sure you're talking into the mic. If we don't do that, the system won't pick it up for the recording. So with that, who would like to start?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned prioritizing projects incorporating slopes. So how does that play? And I guess the steeper the slope, the lower the priority, just because the expectation is it'll be used less?
Yeah, that's how we put it into the plan, considering, anything that was, 5% or lower is considered, easy, highest priority. And the steeper and steeper you get, maybe it's a lower priority. Again, hopefully trying to get people to use these facilities and prioritize what routes that people are already taking or want to take.
Great, thank you. And do we have any, do we have any sense of how successful we might be in securing Climate Commitment Act funding? My understanding is there was a change made at the state that allows non-motorized, some of that funding to go to non-motorized projects. Has there been any sort of analysis on the types of projects that might be successful for that?
Great question. We haven't done any analysis on our draft projects in terms of what may be or may not be grant eligible. It certainly helps to have criteria that's in line with the state, since that's typically our funding partners for these types of projects. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, and then having adopted plans with both a 6-year that will feed into both our 6-year capital plan and our unconstrained lists as well. But we can do some a little bit more research on that too. Great question.
All right, we'll get you a mic. Oh, we just want to make sure the
Good afternoon. My name is Syed.
Let's switch it out.
Okay. There we
Working?
Okay, I have quite a number of questions, but let's start with the crosswalk. First of all, I really appreciate you've done a lot of good things as far as issues that I had some concerns about it, and I believe I sent a bunch of email to the Public Works Director complimenting the staff that they have done an excellent job. Let's start with the something, Audrey, I mentioned it to you. I believe that I mentioned it in an email. There was an SB 5595 that was just passed by the Senate, State Senate, and there are a number of issues on that somewhat related to this discussion as far as the rights of the local jurisdictions, as far as the public roadways, what can be done, what are the regulations as far as the speed and all that. Have you passed it on to the consultant to look into it? 5595. I believe that is the SB number.
Is it related to speed policy?
No, it's much more broad. For instance, give you an idea, which is somewhat surprising. One of the issues has been from the enforcement is jaywalking. They covered that, and they say that right now, under the new SB 5595, the jaywalking is no longer is a citation, is a something that can be tolerated, with the exception of the arterial streets. In the other words, if the street is not arterial, you can do the jaywalking. Police would not stop. That's minor issues, but there are a number of issues as far as the speed control, the speed limits. What can the jurisdictions can do? I believe City of Seattle, of course, ahead of us, back a few years ago, they went back to lower speed, lower than 25. They went to 20. So I was wondering if you have looked at that, and that to what extent that would be applicable to this project.
It's not something that we're looking at right now. Like you said, the speed limits that are on the roadway, for example, are a part of the considerations that we use for our recommendations. I think if the city down the road is interested in looking at some of the speeds of their roadways, that can change what type of facility that they may need to put on that facility. So that's kind of the level that we're looking at it right now as a part of this plan. It's and then if the city is interested in looking at some further down the line.
But I saw in that slide that you actually making recommendation that the
Based
maximum
on the
speed limit in the city, maximum right now, the maximum is 55. And the problem is this, that we have a good part of the 228, the 85th percentile is almost 55 miles an hour. So I'm glad that you're recommending to be reduced to 35. You mentioned about the spacing, and you brought up the issue of the spacing of about 1,000. It would be really nice kind of breaking it down by the classification and make a specific recommendation for the arterial, how much would be, for the minor arterial, how much would be. As you know, the national standard is about between 600 to 1,000, depending on the function classification. Also, control type as far as the crosswalk. Where would that be? What kind are we talking about? That I hope that you're making recommendations that the crosswalk would be very visible with the medians, islands on both sides, and I don't know what kind of control you're recommending. I don't know if you go to that level of detail.
Yeah, at this stage in the plan, we're not going into the level of detail in terms of the type of crossing recommended. That it would be that generally is a part of the study that would be done for if a crosswalk was considered. Don't just put it out there as looking at what improvements would need to be associated, which you're right, depends on the type of roadway and the roadway characteristics, how many lanes, what the speed, et cetera, is. The higher the speed, higher the volume, the higher visibility that crossing
so don't
likely
you think,
should be.
Don't you think these issues would be as part of the policy? These are policies.
Those would be addressed on a project-specific basis or an evaluation-specific basis as we get requests for crosswalks as specific.
So we're not going to have a standard saying that our policy is that if it is arterial, the spacing. Look at right now the 228. The only mid-block crosswalk that you have for the almost 3 miles is only one. The other crossings are at signalized intersections. And that is probably number one complaint. Probably what you have heard from the people is that it's not a matter of a sidewalk, it's not a matter of amenities that you have, but when you don't have a crosswalk, they're not going to be using the facility.
Yeah, we are addressing the spacing in terms of that would be a policy consideration, but in terms of the type of control and protection for that particular crosswalk would
No,
be
I was
dependent
talking
on the
about
road.
the
Yeah, that's
spacing.
what I was- yeah, the spacing is in there.
It would be nice. Also, a lot of facilities that we have in the city, we don't have the continuous sidewalk. And I noticed that maybe I missed it. You didn't talk about the facilities that you have shoulders, particularly wide shoulder, very wide shoulder. A part of the 228 on the northern part, you have 8-foot shoulder. What is your recommendation? What to do with that? Take advantage of it, particularly now we have the financial constraints in the city as far as the budget availability. Should we take advantage of those and put some kind of physical barrier and use that for the time being as a facility that serves the public? Actually, that is substantially reduce the stress if you put some physical barrier.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, in terms of does it reduce the stress or going from a paved shoulder to an actual sidewalk would be an improvement, I would say, and so would get you closer to the desired level of traffic stress that the city is aiming for. So I think when we look at, I think that would be considered as just one of those. Is it on the priority list, right? There's a lot of things that there's a lot of needs, to be honest, right? The city, there's plenty of improvements. There's plenty of gaps that remain, right? And so what is the solution for each individual and where does it lay on the priority for the city is the next stage. And so we're kind of starting at the top and working our way down. And then, so I don't remember if that particular roadway is on our recommended project list, but if it was, then we would say this is the project that we're recommending for that. This is the facility that we're recommending for that roadway.
So
That's
am I
kind of what we're
hearing
trying
that
to
you're going to be including some policy, some recommendations dealing with the wide shoulders that can be used as a part of a sidewalk system?
I don't know that we necessarily are saying that the shoulder should be used as a sidewalk. We're saying maybe that the LTS guidelines would suggest that should be an actual sidewalk, like a curb with a curb and separation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, to some extent. I'm hoping that you would make some reference to it, because as I said, that if I'm not mistaken, the public works budget for the sidewalk per year is only $400,000. $400,000 doesn't get you more than half a mile of a sidewalk construction. So if the city, of course, with the blessing of the council, put part of that money into taking advantage of the wide shoulder, all in a sudden $400,000 will go to about 3-4 miles of the walkway with much stress level than what we have now. So it's a better use of that money instead of focusing $400,000 and build half a mile of the sidewalk. I didn't hear anything about elevated walkway. Is that something that...
If we could just ask you hold the microphone closer, it's not picking up. Thank you.
So I didn't hear that much about the elevated walkway, boardwalk, some places that we have challenges as far as the problem with the slopes and so forth.
So the one
wetlands.
on Southeast 24th, is that, yeah. So my understanding, and so Lindsay, correct me if I have it wrong, is that it is in the city's horizon that boardwalk does need to be improved. And it does show up on our priority list, basically, of a need, because there's only the facility on the north side of the street that is relatively wide, but as we're looking at addressing the need for facilities on both sides of the street, which is always our goal, because of the environmental concerns on the south side of the street. The likely recommendation will be to explore the option of having a wider facility when you rebuild that boardwalk on the north side. That could be like a two-way facility. So yes, I think it's in the city's plans already, or desires. I'm not sure where exactly it is on that list, but yes, that is something that the city already has plans to address.
I'm glad that you mentioned about the incorporation of the recommendation of this study in the TIP, but I want to go a little bit further, and I believe that I mentioned it in an email that I sent it to Audrey, and that is the other projects that, for instance, the overlay projects should have some component of incorporating the recommendation of this study. So when they do the overlay, they should be taking advantage, because if you do it, if you address the walkway and the sidewalk and facilities for the pedestrians, as far as the overlay is going to be substantially less than if you come back, do the overlay and start separate project for dealing with the sidewalks. So I hope that that is something that would come out of it. So it would not only be included in a TIP, but also would be included individual projects such as overlay.
Okay, good. Yeah, something that we're looking at, overlays are a little bit complex in terms of it's a great strategy. There are different stormwater requirements. So if we're going beyond the existing road prism, there's new requirements coming our way in, I think, 2027 regarding pavement and what we can consider to be done under our state requirements for stormwater. So it does add a little bit of a challenge, but I think I understand where you're going with it is in terms of being creative with what we can do in terms of looking at pathways.
Also, I didn't mention.
So real quick, before you continue, if you can ask one more question, and then I'd like to give others a chance in the room, and then we can circle back if time allows. But go ahead and finish the one you were going to start there, and then we'll see if anyone else has comments or questions.
Pavement types. Is there any recommendation as far as going with the porous pavement for the sidewalk or walkways?
We're reviewing all of that. We'll be doing that concurrently with our pavement management strategic plan, which is currently happening right now. Porous pavement is a great solution in the right spot for the right amount of volume. They're very challenging maintenance-wise, especially if they are in the shade. It requires a lot of maintenance that are challenging to upkeep so that they're functioning as a porous pavement.
I didn't hear anything about the local streets if we want to use sharrows. Sharrow, I guess that, I don't know the people, they know what sharrow means. Well, when you have a facility that you don't have a dedicated sidewalk or walkway, you are allowed to use the roadway, but then you put a stencil, you put the marking in the pavement, alerting the motorist that the bicyclist and the pedestrian, they have the same right as the motor vehicle, so it's called sharrows.
Yeah, I would just say the plan again mostly focuses on the arterial network, so we're not really looking at local streets broadly. I think so I think that's been my answer. We're mostly just focusing on the arterial network, so that does not necessarily apply in the case where we are saying there's no facility recommended, which would be at 25 miles per hour and a lower volume. That could be considered, but it's not currently in the plan. So, anyone else have any questions or comments? Yeah.
All right, so I have a question about soft surface trails, which I didn't see defined in there. And if my notes are right, that nobody's allowed to ride there. And so I was just wondering what a soft surface trail actually is.
Well, I think we don't really have much in the city, I think is what the determination was on that. It's kind of trying to cover all the bases, but I think it would be considered like more of a dirt or gravel trail. And I don't have it in front of me to know exactly how we had it, but I think it was either that or at lower speeds.
Yeah, so the challenge with soft surface trails is, as was presented earlier, is for it to be considered part of our transportation network, which is what this is it needs to be ADA compliant. And when you get into soft surface trails, it becomes much more of a challenge to make them ADA compliant for all users. So that's one of the challenges. Also, most of the soft surface trails in the city are in private ownership and not on public right-of-way or publicly owned lands. And so that's something that we need to look and work with the community on in the future, but that's a much bigger work effort than this plan can take on at the moment. It also needs to be in coordination with our Parks Department. And our approach with that is similar to how the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space, or PROS plan, addresses those as well. So it's something that we're aware of, that we would love to work with the community and figure out a way to to do some type of public-private or transition it into a public ownership in the future. But when it's private ownership, it's not necessarily something that we can advertise as, hey, you should go use this trail. And also can't guarantee that it's ADA accessible either.
Got it. Thank you. My next question is a bit of a clarifying question. So I really like the idea of the town center and the things that we have going on there right now. How much of an effect is this plan going to have on the street design in the town center?
So I guess I could say broadly, because a lot of the work effort is going on with town center right now with the SEIS, the supplemental EIS, the code recommendations that team is working on. They've been in coordination with public works staff, so we've had input. We've stayed in contact with each other so that we're aware of what the bike and ped plan is working towards versus what those planning efforts are, so that there's consistency in the recommendations. And then the other benefit on top of all of that we have is that DKS is also assisting with some of the support on the town center effort as well. So they're able to keep that in mind as that plan is being discussed. So there is coordination so that the plans are saying the same thing to get a better pedestrian and bike network.
Awesome, thank you. I think I have only one more question. On one of the slides, you guys had something about, there's a road in Issaquah that you guys had a picture of that is one of my favorite examples of bike infrastructure ever, which is lane, trees, and then the bike lane sidewalk, with the bike lane sidewalk connected together. A couple more back, but that one right on the right, that I love, that makes you feel like a king when you're biking there. It's amazing. So are we considering anything like that where it's, for lack of a better term, like grade separated or buffered to a greater extent than just bollards or armadillos or something like that?
I would say that we haven't gotten, that's a rather specific project oriented decision in terms of whether it meets the level of traffic stress that the guidelines are going for. Yeah, like that would, produce a level of traffic stress to facility. So it could be considered in a future, but it's not something we're saying this needs to happen at any particular location at this stage in the work. Yeah.
Another project that we are in the middle of right now and really getting kicked off in terms of with the community, and we'll begin engagement in the next few months with the community and council, is our update to our engineering details, our public works standards. So this could be an example of if we have several tools in the toolbox that we could consider both as a city and developers can consider when they put in infrastructure, and this could be one of the tools, but it would be on a project-based decision.
Thank you so much. I think that's my last thing.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. So first off, thank you for the presentation. It was very great. But one question I had, and almost like a concern, was kind of relating to what Sid was saying about the slopes and how slopes are less prioritized right now. One of my main, I guess, gripes with the bike network right now is accessing the East Lake Sammamish Trail from Sammamish, or really just getting to Sammamish from anywhere else. One thing I've noticed is on streets like Inglewood Hill and also the Lewis Thompson that's in construction now, is we have bike hills only going downhill. And then going back up, it's really hard to find a way to go back up. So hearing that those are kind of being less prioritized doesn't really sit right with me, because those are the ones where I feel most in danger when I'm riding up like with traffic next to me, and it's a struggle because it's uphill. I would like to have a little bit more separation specifically there, or at least if there's like one good way to get up there. It doesn't have to be on every single road. So I guess I was just wondering why those slopes are being less recommended, or if you have any plans to increase access, at least in one way, to get to Sammamish from below the plateau.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the slope, I'll just say it was one of the lower factors in the considerations. But in terms of the actual, how it works out, so in terms of the connections to East Lake Sammamish Trail, that was something that kind of popped up for us as a need. Like I said, in that map that showed the prioritized need, even though East Lake Sammamish Parkway does show up as a need. And while I said we're not planning to put bike facility and sidewalk facilities on the parkway, the connections to it is definitely a recognized need. So that is likely going to end up as a recommendation. And so looking at how we do that, still working on that, but definitely acknowledge the desire and need to have better connections and more connections potentially to the trail itself through Sammamish.
Thank you. Because even just like one good bike path to get up the hill would be really helpful.
Fair. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, we can give you a few more.
I didn't hear that much about the radar speed limit as a way of controlling the speed and indirectly solving the problem with the stress level.
I think overall, assessing speed limits and changing speed limits are not going to be a recommendation of this plan. That's something that's broader and something that council needs to give explicit direction on. This is not a one-time approach. The bike and pedestrian plan, just like many of our other plans, is intended to be reevaluated and looked at every so often, every few years, and then can be updated based on current direction and the direction the city's heading. So if there's a desire for lower speed limits, then that will be reevaluated and then incorporated into the plan at that time. But this plan is not recommending changing any speed limits. It's working with the existing speed limits and what types of facilities do we need to achieve the recommended level of traffic stress with the existing speed limits and daily traffic volumes.
I misunderstood the slide that shows the speed limit in correspondence to the function classification. That is a part of the recommendation of the study, isn't it? If it is,
that was a misunderstanding, and I may have misspoken in that 35 really it should be 35 miles per hour plus. So really, for any speed, any roadway that has 35 miles per hour or greater, the recommendation for those facilities was that separated bike lane or a sidewalk with at least 6 foot and 6 foot sidewalk with 6 foot separation. So I did not mean to say that the recommendation was to change any speed limits. It's just for roadways of those speed limits. And I should have been more explicit on saying for that highest one, it's 35 and higher would be that type of facility recommended. So.
And then the other thing is that you mentioned about those pylons that City of Seattle are using. It's a nightmare for both maintenance-wise, aesthetic-wise, and everything else. It has a visual effect, but it's not going to be as strong when you're talking about a physical separation. I hope that you're not recommending that because it's going to cost the city because they have to go and replace it. You want to recommend something more aesthetically pleasing, like a low-profile curbs.
Yeah, so
and a lot of cities, they're using that.
Yes, and so we haven't gotten to the details with the city yet in terms of what physical separation means. It can mean many different things. The pylons is one example. Like I said, the planter boxes is an example. Some of the other things we were showing in the pictures are examples. So there's not one solution, and the city has not landed on any specifics for how to achieve that physical separation. The plan is just recommending that for those higher speed roadways, we do provide that. That's the recommendation.
And in respect to...
And that ties into, like I was speaking about, the implementation phase, where the policy's recommending, the facility types are recommending a physical separation, and then through our right-of-way and standards update project that's getting ready to start here in the next few months, then that's where the actual standards can be determined on what that physical separation looks like and what's acceptable and what is not to meet that.
So there's going to be a second phase of this project?
That's a separate project, is our right-of-way code update and our public works standards and engineering details update. So that'll pick up some of these recommendations and then update all of our engineering details so that we can support different types of projects.
And a gentleman that he asked question.
Our maintenance team will weigh in on that too.
That he likes those in the picture. Actually, we're really behind because there are a lot of places. I can give you an example. The picture on the left is actually a block away from Whole Food. That is, you probably have seen it. City of Redmond has started with it. City of Bellevue, actually I talked to them. They started with the most congested roadway. They started doing it, separating the bike lane, and that is Northrop Way, just only a block away. Kirkland has 3-4 projects. We are really behind as far as implementing a physical separation between the bike lane and the travel lane. I hope that we're going to get some money and do some work there. Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions this evening? Yes, absolutely. Just wait for the microphone, please.
It's me again. I had a question about crosswalks. So we talked a lot about the distance between crosswalks and what zones deserve more crosswalks. But something that I've noticed biking around Sammamish is that some trails just get cut off by the roadway and then there's no crosswalk. I was thinking of, I think it's Southeast 8th Street or maybe Southeast 4th Place that has that happen a couple times. Are those projects that we're considering directly, or are we still too early to be considering like direct projects like that?
That might be a little premature. It was alluded to a little bit in our response to how we're handling crosswalks, but we do have on our work plan to do an actual crosswalk study. That actually came out of our transit plan and was supposed to be focused basically on just the transit network through the city, but we're planning on expanding that to be a little bit broader for a crosswalk study perspective for the city. So I think that we'll get into more of that detail when we're able to get to that plan. I think it's planned to start in 2026.
Awesome, thank you. And then I had one more thing about bump outs into street parking. So I'm from Trossachs, and there's a street parking all along the road there, but there are a bunch of intersections that miss crosswalks and continue the street parking so that theoretically a car could park right in front of the ramp to get down into the street. Again, I think I'm thinking a little too specific here, but can you guys say whether or not you will look into that maybe as like curb bump outs as a thing?
Yeah, I think we can take a look at that at some point. And I would say if you have specific locations too, feel free to submit a request either online or in our app for My Sammamish, and our traffic team will go out and take a look at those specific locations too.
Thank you.
So we're new residents to Sammamish, and we live out on 244th. So I'm interested primarily in some of the issues on 244th towards the north end of the city, where there are a lot of newer developments there. You can see where some of them have been, sidewalks have been put in along the frontage of 244th, but to walk in from the city's edge into downtown, into the main business area along 244th. There's quite a few gaps in the sidewalk there, to the point where there's like 2-foot shoulder, and you take your life in your hands to walk along there, or you go through private property and dodge the trees to get to the next piece of sidewalk. And so there's a gap analysis. I just briefly looked at one of the transportation plans that shows a recognition of gaps there. The way the maps are, it's a little bit misleading, because I'm not sure if your definition for gap means having sidewalks on both sides of the street, if that's the standard or what's desirable. In this case, there's some on one side of the street or the other, and some places none at all. And so, and you see, there's a lot of people that walk that street. I believe there'd be a lot more traffic if it wasn't for really, truly dangerous situations there. And that street, I think, is posted at 35, but it's, there's hardly any traffic control. There's no lights along there, so 40, 45 is the standard. And so anyway, I don't know if your plan is going to seriously address that, but there's some, I'd say, pretty serious safety issues there. It isn't a case of having a 4-foot sidewalk or 6-foot sidewalk. It's 2-foot shoulder and then a ditch. And what are you supposed to do with that?
So it does show up. So this, I'm not sure if you saw this while you were here earlier, but this is a map that looks at kind of prioritizing the need throughout the city based on several of the things we were looking at, right? And so you'll see 244th does kind of show up as a mid to high mid need. So it's I think it's in the running for it's recognized as a need is what I'll say, right? Because it does show up as lacking facilities, at least complete facilities, and you're right. The goal is to have it on both sides,
right?
And
to say, well, I'm going to use the sidewalk as much as I can. It means at least 3 crossings. Jaywalking, if you know, I mean, there's no dedicated crossings there. No, strategically, there aren't any located there, which is great for motorized traffic. I mean, as far as getting through there. But again, and the other thing I'd throw out there, safety wise, is it's got this rolling vertical slopes in there, so you can only see so far when the next car is coming over the hill, and you're going, okay, coast is clear, make a mad dash. That's the kind of crossing it is. So anyway, I'll put something in writing as far as, some of the specifics, the thing about it is it wouldn't take too much in terms of bridging the gap there, where there just isn't any place to walk. We're not talking miles or anything. We're talking about, maybe it's 1,000 feet or something. Yeah. Anyway, that's.
I will add that's a common issue throughout the city as the newer developments came in and they did the sidewalk frontage on the roadways. You've got gaps where you don't have another new development that came in, right? And so we're well aware of that. We understand the frustration with that. We also have limited dollars. And so we have to prioritize them somehow. So absolutely, as we're showing, it's a medium-ish to high priority. So where that falls, we'll know better once that work has been completed, the analysis. But definitely it's something we are aware of. All right, any other questions? Yep, to the back, please.
Flipping through the slides reminded me of something about the schools that you guys mentioned, about the circles that you're drawing around the schools. There's a tool that you can use to generate a time map of the school rather than a straight up distance map, and it follows all the roads. It's called an isochrone. Are you guys looking into things like that?
So we haven't done that yet. I will say that the half mile was chosen because we have so many schools across 3 different school districts in the city limits. If, for instance, if you do the safe routes to school standard, it's 2 miles. If we put a 2-mile buffer around it, it covered the entirety of the city of Sammamish with just a couple tiny little pockets. So we needed to bring that down. We know that the elementary schools provide safe walking routes on their websites. It's a requirement that they have to do. Most of it is within a half a mile because the younger aged, they're not expecting they would walk as far. So we wanted to align with that. We also have done a lot of outreach with the school districts. We got some great feedback from one of the school districts on where their high priorities are and how we can work together on that. So no, we have not used that tool yet, but this is a great start.
Thank you.
Oh, if you can wait for a microphone, the gentleman behind you, and then we'll grab you.
Yeah, this is just something that I just thought of. Does this plan include, in its scope, any addition to bicycle parking or bike racks, any sort of parks or places that might be lacking? I can think of a few parks, or any sort of minimum for some large areas that might need to have a bike rack.
So this plan itself is not recommending that. Again, another work effort that we have is looking at mobility hubs. With that, we also have had lots of conversations with our parks department because we understand that bike racks are a need and how we can coordinate getting more bike racks throughout the city, not just in parks. Audrey, do you have anything to add beyond that? That's where we're at from a policy standpoint at this time, but we do recognize that that's something that we need to figure out as well.
Just as Lindsay mentioned, the mobility hubs are mentioned in the transit plan, and that's something that we are working on. We would like to have some standard engineering details around those so that we know what goes in where. Mobility hubs can have a lot of different features, from bike racks to parking, limited parking, to storage lockers for e-bikes as well. So lots of different things. We want to make sure that it's the right location for the right type of adjacent land use and what we think who will be using it. So it's the investing the right dollars in the right spots. So that's something that we're working on with all of this too.
Thank you.
All right, we're bringing the microphone over to you so we can get your question right up here in front, Andrew.
So I just wanted to ask if the presentation will be on the city website.
It will. So it's being live streamed right now, which means it's being recorded, so it will be available on YouTube. As soon as that video is available, I will be updating the city project page and embedding that video into the project page so that it can be watched directly from our website, or you can find it on YouTube.
Okay. And then will there be a mechanism for taking comments on this presentation?
So my email address is included in the presentation, so you're welcome to send me an email or drop a letter off here at the city. Give us a call.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well, we thank you all for taking the time and coming out this evening. We really appreciate it. We really appreciated the conversation and the great questions you all had this evening. So stay tuned, and we'll be back with a public draft early fall.